what Harley Sportster build is your favorite? Alright everybody, what is up? As always, thanks for stopping by to check out today's video. As you know, we travel around Philly on the Sportster, talking motorcycles, meeting up with other riders, traveling around Philly, traveling across PA. So if you are interested in any of that fun stuff, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this video. So as you can see, it's a lovely spring day here in Philadelphia, so of course we got to get out for a ride. Get a little bit of spring riding here on the streets of Philly. It's early April. Sometimes the weather's a little hit or miss, windy, rainy, stuff like that, but today it's like almost 70, sunny, no clouds. Perfect day for riding. We are headed down Fairmount Ave right now, the Fairmount section of Philly. I know you all see me on this road a lot. Kind of in my neighborhood, my section of Philly, so I'm always using this route to kind of get out of the city real quick. Some better roads to ride on. But anyways, we are talking today about the top 5 Sportster build options that you can do with your Harley Sportster. Now, this is by no means an all-encompassing list of things you can do with your Sportster. Also in no particular order either, as I'll just ramble these off the top of my head, not listed from 5 to 1 or most common or anything like that. But I will say I picked these 5 because these are probably the 5 that I see most frequently people doing with their Sportster. So, as we all know, the Sportster is probably one of the most versatile motorcycles out there as to different ways that you can modify it, turn it into totally different looking bikes, things like that. Now, that's not to say that you can't do some of these things with other bikes or other Harleys in the lineup. It just kind of seems that the Sportster is kind of the most common one that you see with like some really radical kind of changes. You can totally turn this into a totally different bike. But like I said, not to say that you can't do that with other bikes, for example. I just don't think it's as common. Like, you don't see people taking like a lowrider S and turning it into a chopper. It's not meant to do that, and you wouldn't want to do that, I wouldn't think. You know, you don't see people taking a touring bike and turning it into like a bobber or something. Like, it just doesn't make sense. But the way that the Sportster is designed and built kind of lends itself to really having all these exposed parts, very simple, mechanical in nature, that allows you to really kind of, you know, tear this thing up and do almost literally whatever you want to it to make it any style bike you want. And I think that's really one of the coolest things about the Sportster and why people like it so much is, I mean, you could take this thing and turn it into a totally different looking bike if you want to. I mean, or you can just totally keep it stock. So all those different build options are what we're going to talk about today. I'll show some pictures up there of examples of what the Sportster looks like when turned into some of these options that I'm talking about. So we're going to get it kicked off here. We're going to get it started with the first one that I'm thinking of, which would be the Dynabro wannabe Sportster. Now, I don't necessarily know if my Sportster falls into any of these categories, but I think the closest would potentially be, for example, maybe the Dynabro Sportster. So we'll throw up a couple images here of some Dynabro Sportsters. When people take their Sportster in the Dynabro direction, basically they're throwing some new shocks on there, they're lifting up the back end to kind of create that gap between the fender and the tire. They're probably throwing some T-bars on here, probably throwing some type of fairing up front, gauntlet fairing, road warrior fairing, something of that nature. And a lot of times they'll probably do a chain conversion kit if it doesn't have a chain already for their drive. They're probably doing a chain drive on there too, doing a chain conversion. So that's the first one I'm thinking of, is the Dynabro Sportster build. Raising up the back with the shocks. They're probably throwing the Saddleman step-up seat on there. Again, a fairing, T-bars, all that stuff. Trying to make it look like that Dyna style, but again, still, it's always just a Sportster. You can try to make it look like that, but it's not exactly ever going to be a Dyna, which is fine. I still think they look cool, even when turned into that. Alright, so the next Sportster build I'm thinking of is a pretty common one, and that's the bobber. Now, the Sportster already comes, especially some of the newer ones, already come kind of with that bobber look to them, chopped fenders, you know, slammed kind of stance. But when people take their Sportster to kind of the next bobber level, if you will, they're going to chop that rear fender even further. They might even remove the rear fender altogether. They're probably going to have like a solo, bare bones, minimal seat on there, maybe even sometimes a Springer seat for that bobber look. And then for bars, they're probably going to have like some Z bars or some drag bars to give you kind of that reached over, leaned over bobber type look. A lot of times people are going to throw kind of some fatter rear and front tires on their bobbers as well when they do that with a Sportster. I know a couple of the popular ones that I've seen lately was Blockhead did a really cool bobber build with a Sportster 48. I know another guy I see on YouTube has a pretty cool bobber looking Sportster, Get Wrenched. He totally ripped up kind of the rear fender, which looks pretty awesome. I think he cut it down himself. I think he's got Z bars up there as well. So another option, which would be the bobber. Always a great look for the Sportster on the bobber. So next, the third build that I'm thinking of for the Sportster, this one you kind of see on older Sportsters, I think, a lot, is a chopper. So chopper are somewhat similar to the bobber. People are going to strip all the stuff away, strip as much as they can away. They're going to put that big rake out on the front, probably remove the front fender as well, give it that old school classic stance, raked out front end, throw some ape handlebars up here as well. I'm a huge fan of kind of like those 80s, early 90s Evo choppers I see a lot out there. And again, we'll throw a couple pictures up here. You take a look at those. Like I said, I don't see a ton of new Sportsters getting turned into choppers. A lot of times it's those like 80s, early 90s Sportsters. People are turning those into choppers, and I think they just look awesome. You know, strip all this stuff away. No speedo, no front brake. Rake out that front end, remove the fender, you know, single solo seat there. I think those look absolutely awesome and great options to turn your Sportster into as a chopper. So the next one on my mind, next one on my list, number 4, believe it or not, there's always a lot of talk about how this works out for the Sportster, but is you can turn this thing into a freaking touring bike if you want to. So what are you going to do to your Sportster if you turn it into a tour? Well, I would say most commonly you're probably going to put a windshield on there to block some wind on some of those long trips. Most likely also, from what I see people do, you're going to get a big comfy cushy seat upgraded on there to help your rear on some of that long traveling. And then you're going to throw saddlebags on there to kind of store some stuff, luggage, your items, possessions, traveling for multiple days at a time. You're going to need to store stuff and carry stuff with you, obviously, as well. Also, I know when people turn their Sportster into a touring bike, they're probably going to put some forward controls on there so they can stretch out, reach out a little bit on those longer rides so they don't get all cramped up on these mids. Like I said, I just put the Bun King crash bar on there. I can't even reach it, but hey, whatever. I know if you turn this thing into a touring bike, you know, you're going to have your bags, like I said, upgraded seat, maybe even upgrade the suspension. And that's going to help you make this thing nice and comfy for some of those long traveling trips. And finally, we're going to wrap it up with the 5th way to build out your Sportster. Common one that I see is the Scrambler. Turn your Sportster into a Scrambler. So what are you going to do when you turn your Sportster into a Scrambler? Well, first thing is probably going to be get some big knobby off-road tires on the front and back. That's going to help you through some of those, you know, wooded areas, dirt roads, gravel, all that type of stuff where you're normally taking your Scrambler on and off road. Probably going to jack up the suspension a little bit, obviously, too, because you're going to need some clearance. You're going to need to be raised up. I know a lot of times for a Scrambler look, people probably throw like a BMX motocross in style type bar across the front, which is pretty common. Might even swap out some stuff for plastics as well, because if you're getting scrambling out there, you know, if you're dropping it, tipping over, dumping it, different stuff like that, you might have like some plastic fenders, front and rear, something like that. And then another key piece of the Scrambler build is probably going to be like that shotgun style exhaust that comes right down the side instead of down towards the bottom like a 2-to-2 or 2-into-1. You probably have 2-to-2 going right across the middle there. And again, You notice that in a lot of the pictures that I just popped up there of what a Sportster Scrambler can look like. So those are the 5 main ones that I was thinking of for Sportster builds. Obviously, like I said, not an all-encompassing list, but pretty in-depth there, pretty common ones that I see a lot. Let me know if I missed any out there. Let me know what other builds that you see commonly with Sportsters outside of what I mentioned. Drop it down there in the comments, or let me know what your favorite way to build out a Sportster is. I know I got a couple guys or gals tuning in there that have some of these builds that they've done on their Sportsters. Again, recapping it, we did the Dynabro Sportster, the Bobber, the Chopper, the Touring Sportster, and then rounded it out with the Scrambler Sportster build. And again, like I said, it's not that you can't do some of this stuff with other bikes, but you know, like certain bikes, like you're just not gonna do that type of thing to them. Just like a street bob, already kind of like a bobber, but I mean, you're probably not gonna turn that into like a Scrambler, for example. Alright, so that is going to wrap it up for today. Fun little conversation about all the different directions you can take your Harley Sportster as far as modifications go. So we'll wrap it up here, taking a cruise through the Germantown section of Philly. We're going to continue on our way. Nice spring day for riding. We'll get a little more miles in and then wrap it up and head home. As always, make sure you ride safe out there. We'll catch you on the next one. It's the Moto John. We'll see y'all on down the road. Peace!